Our attention tonight is on the agitation of the Nigerian labor on behalf of the Nigerian people, challenging the planned hike in the tariff of telecommunications in the country. A few weeks ago, the federal government had come out that there will be a possible about 50% hike in the telecom's tariff after the federal government met with telecom's operators in the country. So yesterday, the representatives of the Nigerian Labour Congress met with representatives of the federal government. And after that meeting, Nigerian Labour Congress announced that it will pull out of the protest or suspend the protest pending the consultation, which is supposed to take place for 2 weeks with federal government representatives. I understand 5 from both sides of the divide. And after the 2 weeks, there will be a report of which the Labour will then have to act on. Whether or not they agree, that will depend on what the outcome of the 2 weeks deliberation is all about. But let's get a lot more from what was said yesterday at that meeting. The leader of the Labour will lead the delegation, the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, and is live for us tonight on the program. Comrade Joe Ajaero is the president of the NLC. Thank you so much, comrade, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Can you bring us up to speed? What more do we have to know that you can tell us that came out of that meeting yesterday with the federal government?
Well, what we realized was that the federal government have concluded their own arrangements for the 50% tariff increase. Like all arms of government have been taken into consideration, from the security angle, from the executive, and from the legislature. And they said that they had conducted a study, which paneled them to do the 50% increase. And of course, have to debunk them. And it was at the end of that argument transfer that the issue of setting up committee was arrived at. So as we talk today, they have made up their minds. If we didn't do what we did, I doubt whether they would have stopped at 50%. But the committee is to look at all that again. But one thing that is clear is that the tariff hike was supposed to start by March 1st, and the committee is expected to come up with their report. What happens thereafter will now be for Nigerians to see.
But give us an understanding. You were supposed to lead a protest nationwide to challenge the position of the federal government on the planned hike in tariff. But one would imagine that if this is supposed to affect the generality of the Nigerian people, from the meeting that you had with them, does it look that the federal government consulted with the Nigerian people as stipulated by law? Because such a hike in tariff, stakeholders have to be consulted before an upward review, except if I'm wrong. But comrade, give us an understanding, the procedure through which the federal government or the regulator and the operators needed to have gone through in determining a new tariff regime for a sector like the telecoms.
Well, before we started, that was the main point we tried to drive home, the issue of consultation. And if you watch, it was emphatic that NLC is one of the single largest organizations in the whole of Africa, and there's both consultation that could have excluded us that we are going to allow to pass through. However, they started with a clear apology for this lack of consultation. And this is not the first time. In almost everything that we do, even the tariff increase in the power sector and others, we do it without recourse to stakeholders and consultation. And we actually try to drive it home before them that even when we negotiated minimum wage, what was at the center of it was the issue of ability to pay. The government tried to insist on their ability to pay, even when what we were demanding was so high. And then that issue of ability to pay, must come to play here, that we Nigerians don't have the ability to pay the tariff they are increasing. And I think these are some of the issues that came up in that meeting. Then in all fairness, they tendered apology for not consulting. Then we had to start the meeting from there.
But in this, is there any breach of the law? Because there's supposed to be statutory consideration for this kind of decision if it's to be taken by the federal government or the regulator or the operator. I mean, are there statutory, because there should be a framework in which you engage them, and whether or not these breaches happen based on the provision of the law.
Well, if you look at the issue of the provision of the law, in most instances, the provision of the law was kind of vague. And that was equally what happened in the power sector. I remember having that altercation with the former Minister of Power. And then they hide it into the act that there will be consultation, stakeholders or whatever. And in most instances, the law does not specify, the critical stakeholders. And in that instance, I now ask the minister, if you say it's stakeholders and he didn't mention the stakeholders, then after consulting with your family, we'll assume that you have consulted. So those are the issues and those are the lapses. Yes, there was provision for probably consultation, but see, they choose whom to consult. They choose the people they want to consult. They have their own so-called consumer associations, and that is why when these things happen, you start to hear calls from here, people saying that they are consumers association, you should not equally protest it. They have consulted them, and those consumers associations are not people, who consume more than you, or who are more critical than you, or who represent more people. So those are issues that going forward we have to insist on, and see how we do further amendments moving forward.
So give us an understanding, Mr. President, on your decision. So you backed down on the protest, you suspended the protest just on one condition, that there will be consultation between the labor union representatives and the federal government representatives. Are there other terms that were agreed upon after that meeting or in that meeting?
Well, so the issue, we are the people that determined that we want to do ABC, and we stated the conditions that we want. The first condition is to bring them to the table to discuss this, which they were not willing to do ab initio. And then we stated it clearly. And then when we got to that point, of bringing them to the table to discuss, we will not go for protest or rally for the sake of it. And our protest was aimed at delivering letter, to the EVC and the Minister of Communication in the first instance. But both of them were there, and we told them that we want to deliver letter. But we opened discussion on it. And then without firing a shot, and we got that all of them are coming back to the table for us to discuss this. I wonder what the protest would have achieved more than this.
What do you think, before I go into some of the data, I spoke with the communications minister when this was being contemplated. 50% is what the benchmark that has been proposed, and he has said it won't be more than 60%, but now they propose 50%. How significant is this increase?
Well, I think the Minister of Communication should be in a better position to talk about the significance of this increase, because all the arguments they brought there was that the sector will collapse. if this increase is not carried out, and that almost everything depends on the sector. And we try to prove to them that that's not correct. The sector will not collapse. We only looked at the tele-density in the country, because we made them to understand that apart from India and China, Nigeria is the country with the highest number of people who are connected. And that as of today, we have more than 200 million active lines. And that is where their money should be, and not, increase. And of course, they came up with ideas of posting losses for quite some time now. And we linked that losses they were claiming to the situation in the country. The inflation in the country, which was caused by all those factors we were trying to adduce another increase. And we tried to explain to them that if you equally force this increase through people may stay a whole month, they won't even buy any credit, they won't recharge their funds, and continue to, suffer loss. So a whole lot of other issues and arguments back and front, and we realize that countries of the world don't go into this issue of 50% increase in tariff. And we were clear equally to them that they had no incentive to the Nigerian people. In some countries of the world, you have maybe weekend free calls. You have free calls 7 hours of the day. You have free text messages and all that. And those things were not here, and we are not experiencing it. And at the time they were giving licenses, the issue of data wasn't pronounced. And that these days that they make more money through data. And almost everything, POS and even children writing exams depend on data, and that they are making a whole lot of money in terms of quantum money they are taking to the banks.
So let's look at it. And I asked that question because I thought that we might be able to dwell on some facts and figures that might contradict or that might validate either the position of the federal government or Labour. So to put it in context, and Mr. President, you can also help with whatever data that is available to the Labour. If the 50% increase is adopted, we might see the average cost of phone calls, which is voice call, might rise from 11 naira to 16 naira 50 kobo per minute. I hope I'm right based on your calculation, because I know that Labour would have done all their mathematics and put their figures together so that Nigerians can understand the implications of these. If the 50% increase is adopted, telephone calls might rise from 11 naira to 16 naira 50 kobo per minute. SMS charges could rise from 4 naira to 6 naira. And the price of a 1 gigabyte data bundle might increase from 287 naira 50 kobo to 431 naira 25 kobo. That is a calculation that I have that I've been able to put together, but I don't know, does it look like the figure that you also have?
Yeah, apparently this is in percentile basis. And there will be no disparity between your calculation and ours. But this amounts to a 50% increase. And if you now look at this, by the number of minutes or seconds, then that will give you the actual amount an individual is supposed to spend per day and per month. You are right.
The question is that, have you also considered the plight of the operators? So several years now, they've been operating on the same tariff regime. And there's been inflationary effect. There's been economic implications on their own operations. There has been hike in the price of the materials and the cost of their production, which also should have naturally affected the cost of their products and their services. Is it right? Because if you consider all other services in the country, prices have jumped but telecom's prices have remained the same over the years. Have you also considered the plight of the operators? They need to survive. The fact remains that things are not the same in Nigeria compared to the last 2 years or 3 or 4 years or 5 years. And for so many years, the telecoms sector has remained stagnant in terms of pricing and in terms of tariff.
Well, I think I will not be here to make case for them on profit maximization. At the point they were giving licenses, there were some issues there. The issues were that at that point they didn't have up to 50,000 subscribers. And how you make money, even in ordinary business, is not the amount you put on a product. It's on the total you sell for that product. Now, at that point, some of them paid about $250 something or thereabout dollars for licensing. And part of the agreement was that maybe the government should have used part of the money to develop infrastructure. Then, if those infrastructure were not developed and the money were shared by tiers of government from the federation account, now, and then they were now doing maybe building masks and other things, generating power through diesel in their own areas. It's at that time. Now, if it were 50,000 people that were involved, and now they had a large market from 50,000, subscribers to 200 million subscribers or more. Now, if you are looking at the profits margin based on 11 naira to 16 naira, and you are not looking at it from 50,000 subscribers to 200 million subscribers, then we are not being realistic. That's not business. And I think this is where we should concentrate our energies on. And if you are looking at business and you are not thinking of using technological advantages that is available to you to run business, and you are now thinking that it is only by increasing tariff that you are going to make profit, then you are not being serious. Now, the whole world is going green in terms of energy. Those of them that decide to use solar to generate rather than buy diesel. Now, if you were buying diesel at 200 naira at inception, and then you are now using solar now, that you don't need to buy any diesel, of course you make more profit than it. It is only when you now come to Nigerians to increase tariff, that you now say you are buying diesel at 800 or at 1,000. Now that's when you have to change based on dynamics of that business climate.
But I mean, if you look at it this way, the losses that some of these operators are establishing, reporting. For example, and I'll use one of the most popular operators in Nigeria, the MTN Group. MTN Group reported 414.7 million loss in 2024. And the reasons for these reported loss is due to, one, energy costs, currency devaluation, and higher taxes, which is affecting every other sector that is experiencing higher tariff, higher incentives. But they have complained of stagnancy as far back as 2019, when prices and the indices that guide their sector remains the same. The same MTN recorded huge losses in 2023 due to operational expenses like diesel for cell towers and the rising cost of importing equipment, which, of course, we do know that when you are buying things out of the country, Forex is a scarce commodity, and it will impact on how much you spend. So Forex was responsible for some of the differences. So, I mean, Labour, I'm very sure, is not saying to increase tariff. And I guess what you are fighting is the percentage. Is that right?
Well, so let me say this. You have dished out these figures, which was to make some case for them. These guys have operated for a long time, and we are just talking of loss they made. or maybe 2024, 2023. The same MTN made 2.7 trillion profits in 2022. In the same way, Airtel realized over $1.2 billion in the same period. And then you make profits over the years, maybe 10 years or 15 years, and then in a year or so you didn't make profits. And then you decide on your own that the problem is tariff, and it is the tariff that is not making you to make profit. Then you have to look inwards to find out why you are not making profit. And then when you make profit, you save for the rainy days. Most of them were moving out this profit, out of the country. You invest for the rainy days. That's the sense of making profit. It's not any time you don't make profit, you now look at tariff increase as the only way out. Now you ask yourself, any of these conditions on tariff, and then probably cost of energy, probably foreign exchange, whatever, is there any of these factors that is not affecting the people who are supposed to pay this or this new tariff? The answer is no. And then you want to punish them more. If they go into this, and I said this earlier, into this tariff increase, people will not be able to subscribe, and situation will continue this way. So I think we need to sit down, just like we have been able to achieve now, and look at all these issues. Look at windows for people to make profit in their business, for not to make profit the blood of others. I think with all this, we can't say people who are been doing business and who have been making profit for over 10 years or 12 years, should not make profit. But that will not be profit, that will undermine the existence of the whole country. That will not be a profit, that will bury the country and bury the economy. Because if they increase at 50%, every other thing, including rice and beans, will increase by 50%. Inflation will equally increase by 10%. And they will still come back to ask for another adjustment based on inflation, which they instigated by this, increase of 50% tariff increase. And they are yet to tell us countries that if increase tariff of telecom by 50%. That's not how it's done.
I mean, and as a president, I was asking, you are not opposed to increase in tariff. What you are opposed to is the percentage. Is that right?
Tariffs could increase, but they have to be justified. So you have to look at the indices, that will lead to increase in tariff. It's not for the sake of tariff increase.
But the telecom sector, we are understanding as of 2022, the NCC projected that it had a contribution to Nigeria's GDP up to about 14.5%. And it's so important to driving digital economy in the country. But if you look at it, Mr. Ajaero, with the telecom sector being a critical part of Nigeria's economy, what alternative or solutions would you propose to address the financial needs of telecom operators without imposing additional burdens on consumers?
Well, I've tried to stipulate some of them. I've marshaled out some of them. We can look at the green process of, generating electricity, generating energy, wind turbines, solar. Now, because if you address that energy cost, you have almost addressed majority, if not 80% of the cost they were pushing out. That is one, and that is clear. Because when they talk of equipment and all that, you discover that how many equipment have they purchased between the time they came into operation till now. To what extent are they still using Nitel equipment up to today? Because it's important, and that's the disadvantage of having private sector monopoly. So because if Nitel was in existence and you balance up both private and public sector participation in that market, because when we talk of the regulation, we look at it as the regulation is exclusive to the private sector. Now, if there was a competition between Nitel lines and then other lines, then I think we'll be in a better position to subscribe for the one we are going to. But meanwhile, Nitel lines, even the TCN line, optic fiber lines, are there for them for use. So we should be able to know what they want and how to an extent they have utilized what is available and what infrastructure that should be available for them. why we go on digital economy. I think the whole world are going there, and a lot is happening, and that which is happening is giving them more money. Banking transactions today means more money. Exams today are conducted through that process, and it is money. No matter the how. Now we are talking on Zoom. It means more money, to the telecom sector. It's not only when you now increase tariff, increase the burden on Nigerian people that you know that we're making money.
So quickly, before I go on a break, comrade, does this government look like a government that loves to put more tariffs, levies, and some kind of financial burden on the Nigerian people? Because you have threatened not once, not twice, protests and strike actions because of the proposition of government to increase levies or taxes or any form of additional payment that citizens will have to do. Are you worried about this attitude or the characterization of the present government in terms of how they manage what comes from the Nigerian people to the coffers of government?
Well, Shehu, have you not seen a percentage of tariff increases? Have you not seen the percentage of increases in certain products, like the petroleum products, like PMS? Now, check majority of the people in the federal civil service. Call any of them to tell you the tax. Some people that are not earning much pay the tax of almost 100,000, 150,000 this month. Now, is it me? Have you not seen that 50% being contemplated in the telecom sector is just happening? So, do I need to tell you that these are tariff increases happening, too many?
Saying that, are you worried that a government comes into power and all of these tariffs and increases are happening and the indices of the economy are also not favorable to the average person? Does it bother the mind? Is Labour worried about this trend? It's become a trend anyway, and it's going across board.
Well, what you can see that we are playing our own role to make sure that we look at, a tariff that people will pay and they will survive. That's the concern of Labour, not lamentation. We can't continue in lamentation, but we'll contribute our own quota by saying, hey, this is too much. We may not be able to survive under this. And that's exactly what we are doing. That's how we're expressing our worries, by complaining, by protesting. And if we're able to achieve something minimum or reasonable, we would have done what we're supposed to do.
Let's take a breather, comrade. When we come back, our conversation will continue on what will be the interest of the Nigerian people. Yes, government says it wants to play its role, but is that a detriment of the Nigerian people? It's choking, it's frustrating for the average person who has to pay more in buying commodities in the market and have to pay even more in speaking to his families, wherever they may be. Ajaero is the NSA president and is speaking with us, and we will be right back with him and more on this. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Comrade Ajaero, he is the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress and has been speaking with us on the planned increase in Telecom's tariff. Thank you so much, comrade, for your time tonight. Comrade, I look at it, impact on small businesses. A 2022 report by the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDAN, indicates that over 41 million SMEs could be affected by increase in operational costs. How do you propose that the Labour Congress advocates for these businesses and rising telecom costs?
Well, you talk about 41 million SLAs being affected by cost, and I think we are trying to add another 50% cost on telecom. Definitely, more than half of these will go out of business. Because most businesses these days thrive on this, on the telecom, whether it is whether it is through WhatsApp, through whatever means. And this is why we should be particular, in ensuring that this area, we pay attention to it. Because they will not survive under this high telecom tariff and survive under the same energy tariff by the energy electricity companies that are not even supplying, 24 hours to giving them 24 hours supply. So I think we should be mindful adding additional burden on these SLAs. And I think on that note, I agree with you on this, that we should lessen the burden and through as much as possible all incentives that they require, to be in business.
But where do we go from here in terms of balancing the act, the necessity for sustainability? Because no one wants these businesses to die, because there are those who are working in these organizations, and the operators also need to thrive because they contribute in quantum proportion to the Nigerian economy. And I look at it, data from the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, shows that Nigeria has one of the highest mobile data costs in Africa, with an average cost of $0.83 per gigabyte in 2022. But how do you reconcile these with the proposed tariff hikes, and what message does this send to foreign investors? Then the balancing act, the sustainability of the sector, vis-a-vis how the citizen and the average person is going to react, and what it impacts directly into the monies in their pockets.
Well, if I heard you clearly, we are talking of highest mobile data. Nigeria, and then if that is true, and we are trying to touch that area, I think we should have a rethink, and look at what will enable everybody to survive. If the data here is high, and at the same time we have a very high teledensity in terms of subscribers, we should strike a balance to see what happens. But if they are trying to calculate their profit on foreign exchange, on a dollar and euro situation whereby we are devaluing, then to the extent that they will be telling you that they made profits will be affected because the currency is being devalued. And then if they are actually making their profits, here in Nigeria, I think they should look at some other incentives that they are supposed to introduce to people who are subscribing to them, to make businesses easy for them to survive. Because if the subscribers can't pay, there's no amount of tariff adjustment that will make them to make profits.
Let's look at it this way. One of the fear of government will be the possible or the potential threat of civil unrest and organized protests against government's decision. But how do you envision the role of the Nigerian Labour Congress in ensuring that protests remain constructive, organized, focused on dialogue rather than disruption? And what strategies have you put in place? And I'm imagining that in your mind, you are hoping that the 2 weeks meeting with the representative of NLC and the federal government will be fruitful and will bring a positive result if they agree. If they do not, what are your alternatives?
Well, we don't want to believe that they will disagree, but disagreeing at this point will bring us back to status quo. And then bringing us to status quo, bring everybody back to the drawing board. We were clear what we wanted to do, if the ABCD are not looked into. And I think the concession was clear. And like you said, the issue of protests and civil unrest, at least you have captured it. If you do things with proper consultation of the people, and you look at their situation in the adjustments, it may not lead to civil protests. may not lead to civil unrest. And that is why no matter how the names you call the NLC, we understand this protest and we don't do it for destructive purposes. We do it to achieve an aim. And then when we want to embark on any protest, it is for an aim. And then if that aim is being met, we don't go ahead, without apology to people who are calling us names, they are proud of the protest. What was protest meant to understand in the first place? If you have not fired even the first shot, and then we are talking at the table. But I think that what is important is for everybody to, show enough interest for us to achieve this aim. And if we achieve this aim, the issue of civil unrest, the issue of protest, be minimized. And I think that's why NLC is committed and will do its best in providing the data, providing all the argument that's necessary and that is needed for us to break distance.
Comrade, let me then ask you about the minimum wage. There are still those who are yet undecided and those who have not started implementation. But I know that some of your colleagues are threatening and saying after the first quarter of this year, there will be a showdown with state government or any entity of government or any employer of labor who fail to meet up the demand of labor on the approval of the national minimum wage.
Yeah, the issue is that the national minimum wage is a law, and that if it is enacted into law, one should not expect any employer to violate such laws. And I think it's on what we'll do either is to either ensure that the law is enforced. Any of the parties can ensure that the law is enforced. But as at today, as at the last time we tried to evaluate, agreements and promises here and there, virtually almost all the states, have covenanted to involved in the payment of the minimum wage, actually. But to the extent that they are going to honor it religiously is what matters. Some of them, if they go into its breaches, it may emit some reaction from such states. But that's why we are here, to make sure that such action will be the last option. And you can see that we have been negotiating. Almost by April, will be about 1 year, we started this process of minimum wage. And if you watch the tax regime, the tariffs, immediately they start implementing. It's only minimum wage that they are dragging behind for a long time. But we believe that the few remaining states, will, by the end of this month and probably early next month, will try to do a review and see the states that have not implemented and find out why we are having such.
There was a communique, an agreement between Labour and the federal government, and this was as far back as October the 2nd, 2023, and there was a 15-point agreement between federal government and Labour. But I don't know whether Labour is still following up with the federal government and holding them accountable on some of the promises they made when they removed subsidy and the promises they made to cushion that effect on the average person in terms of transportation, in terms of welfare of the citizens. Are you following up? Because one area that is concerning, though, is whether or not the refineries are functional. But from what we hear and the records that are shown in the tracking of the freighting of refined products into the country, it does show to us that there is still a lot that one needs to be worried about. Over 4 billion liters of PMS transported into this country from October last year and January. NLC President, are you aware and are you worried about this trend, about the opaqueness in the manner in which things are run in the petroleum sector, for example?
Well, I think we have to look at this from the framing of that agreement which you talked about. In the framing of the agreement, it just talked about the Port Harcourt Refinery coming into operation. And before the end of last year, the Port Harcourt Refinery was said to have started operation, at least up to 40% capacity. Whether it has relapsed again is another issue and another discussion for another day. And the maintenance was still on there for the remaining sections commence operation. And that was what they promised us. And there was no promise that Port Harcourt Refinery, the input there, would be able to solve the Nigerian problem. There was no such. But I'm aware that within this period, in complete adherence to local content, that the Dangote Refinery have started to work. And if at all you now add what is coming out, the output from Dangote Refinery and Port Harcourt Refinery, then, and it's not enough, and they are still important. I think there is still much to be desired for all of us, to put us and then to make sure that the Warri Refinery, Kaduna Refinery, it starts operational, so that we'll know, whether we still have areas to bring in. But I don't think that the alternative is, if you are not refining domestically, that you should not bring in products into the country. However, if you bring excess products into the country and you are still refining here, definitely if you have excess, the price may come down. So those are some of the agreements we had. Second agreement, which may close to this issue of refinery, is the issue of converting to CNG buses. And then, yes, there has been some CNG buses. Some have been sent to labor. We have tried to commission some in some zones. However, the infrastructure is not there. Commission a CNG bus in some parts of the country, in fact, even the major cities of this country, and there is no station for you to refill it, like using PMS again. So we have to diversify on all these sources, look at electric engine, look at CNG, and then if we emphasize on all these areas, we can't be depending on PMS all the time, especially at the time that the whole world is trying to de-emphasize, the use of fossil fuel, especially because of the effect on the ecosystem.
So I'm asking this question because transparency has to come into it. We need to know, since NNPC has the sole responsibility of determining, and we do the role of the NNPDRA is very it's statutory. As far as the Petroleum Industry Act is concerned, and it states, and we need to understand, with all of the modular refineries, let's put them in one pack. Dangote Refinery on one hand, the Warri Refinery, the Port Harcourt Refinery, we do know that they're not performing optimally. But the combination of all of these refineries, what are the figures? If NNPC can come clean and the federal government can come to Nigerians to say, yes, this is the production capacity and this is the consumption capacity of Nigeria, and together all of these refineries cannot serve our consumption, because that law, section 317, stipulates that clearly that NNPDRA is supposed to withdraw import licenses of importers if the domestic market shows that it can provide supply for the market. If we are importing as much as 4 billion liters of products in just 4 months, and when all of these are on the ground, we need to understand whether or not they are not able to meet our demands. And that's why I'm asking you, NLC President, are you able to hold the government accountable? If we spend a lot of monies we borrow to fix these refineries, we need to know, and the government needs to be transparent to tell Nigerians the real truth about these refineries and whether or not they are serving us, together with all of the private interests we have in this country.
Well, Shehu, I will just look at this from some perspectives, because I understand the role of the fourth estate of the realm, which is the media, in this whole conversation, and in holding the people, especially the leaders, accountable. And I will extend the hand of fellowship to the media in the country for us to bring this to a public view in terms of what government is spending and the production capacity of these various refineries as of today. But the second point, which I have stressed before, is the issue of diversification. All of us can be on PMS. There will be much pressure on that area. If we go into CNG and bring more of electric vehicles, reduce the pressure on PMS. Now, finally, and which is important, is the issue of regulatory captures in the country. Whether it is the one in the oil and gas, whether it's the one in electricity, whether it's the one on telecom, the level of regulatory capture has gone too high. And then the regulators are not doing what they are supposed to do. And that is where you are now asking, whether NLC is holding them into accountable. So if people are not producing, and there is an agency, a regulatory agency that is supposed to seize their license, another agency is not seizing their license, I think you and I have to look at it. If the laws establishing the electricity sector, the place that before you increase tariff, there must be consultation with stakeholders. The same thing with telecom. And these things are not done. But the regulators there don't care. They are not doing anything. They are working hand in glove with the operators. Then the issue of regulatory capture has come up. And when that happens, the citizens suffer.
It's so sad. We need someone to talk to Nigerians. We cannot take Nigerians for a ride. We are in 2025. We are not in 1999. Nigerians cannot be taken for a ride. Come clean, let us know the figures. Are we able to meet our local demands? Why are import license? Has some interest been entertained and being serviced in this country other than the interest of the Nigerian people? Someone needs to be talking. Someone needs to be held accountable. We are doing our own role as the media. Thank you so much, Mr. Joe Ajaero, NLC President, for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.